It's important.
Well, I asked Mike to forward him on to Brian.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is a meeting of the Oregon Village Board. It is Monday, April 8, 2019 at 5 p.m. I'd like to call a meeting to order and request roll call, please.
Carpenter? Here. Staton?
Here.
Glish?
Here.
Peterson? Here. Bollig? Here. Jacobson? Here. Boudreaux?
Here.
Thank you. All present and accounted for. Item 3 is public appearances. Item A under that, discussion with Mike and Susan Zeter, 275 Jefferson Street, regarding Badfish Creek and possible board action. So Mike and Susan, are you here? Yes. Okay. If you'd like to come to the microphones, please identify yourself. And
Mike Zeter, 275 Jefferson Street in Oregon. Lived there for over 19 years. And what I wanted to talk to the board about, or what Tanner will kind of represent those of us in the 200 to 500 block of Jefferson Street, is a bad fish drainage ditch, really, and what to do about that. So we've been having a lot of conversations really over the years about it. And the last year or so, since the construction, the road construction on Jefferson Street, it's gotten worse. So we got together Saturday, shared thoughts, what we knew about it, and put those together. And Tanner, I'll let you take it from there, what we discussed Saturday.
Yeah, so my name's Tanner Nystrom. I moved into Oregon myself and my fiance Allison moved into Oregon in October of last year. So we've been here for about 6 months. After meeting with Mike and a few other members of the community here, I just wanted to put together my thoughts and what I kind of assess is going on. I will preface by saying that, you know, what I've written and what I plan to say, I hope to capture what a number of us are feeling and thinking and how we would like to engage the board and ask for assistance. But by no means does this capture everyone's opinions, I'm sure.
Should we give them an idea just how many of us are here from Jefferson Street?
Sure.
To discuss the topic?
yeah, I kind of guessed that.
All right.
Yeah, usually.
Usually the chairs are empty.
Okay.
So with that said, last week I learned that our property is located within the Badfish First Edition drainage area, a designated special flood hazard area. As evidenced by the flooding last fall and spring, the Badfish First Edition is not adequately diverting water, is overdue for maintenance, and likely needs modifications to handle the rising water levels. Moreover, the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection website lists the district as active with no record of recent assessment. After discussing mutual concerns with my new neighbors, I was asked to speak to you today regarding the impact a rising water level has for our properties in the floodway, our growing concerns of the situation if left unaddressed, and the opportunity to work together and take mitigation actions to prevent unnecessary harm to our community. There are more than 25 parcels of land firmly within the designated floodway and more throughout the community affected by high waters. This past year, we have seen water levels threaten an increased number of homes and businesses worth millions of dollars in property value. As a result, residents have had to take a number of independent actions to deal with the impacts of flooding. They have had to retile their basements, install new sump pumps, repair damaged structures, address mold growth, purchase costly mitigation equipment, and make permanent home airflow improvements as a result of encroaching high waters. Today, I requested a quote for flood insurance from my insurance agent, and based on the state average, I anticipate it will cost me about $1,000 a year. In addition to the financial concerns, however, we consider how this issue has affected and will continue to affect our lives. As summer approaches, we anticipate that we will not be able to mow our lawns due to standing water and supersaturated soil, which will undoubtedly lead to elevated insect populations and limit our ability to use our property for recreational activities as originally intended. Although I am new here, Allison and I moved to Oregon to become active members of the community and start a family. We are worried that unless preemptively addressed, the aforementioned issues will only continue to worsen and depreciate the quality of our home, as well as the general quality of life. The floodplain bottlenecks in the downtown area of Oregon, where a number of businesses provide us with quality services and tie the growing community together. I think that preparation for rising waters and appropriate mitigation actions will help ensure that our community continues to experience the positive effects future growth can bring. Furthermore, I think that the alternative of decreased property values and financial strain of residents in the downtown area is not a benefit to anyone. which is why I'm here today on behalf of my neighbors to ask for your assistance. From our initial research, we understand that solutions are not simple and that any meaningful resolution will involve the landowners, the village board, the drainage board, and the community. A resolution will require effort on our part, as well as the assistance from the drainage board and the village to be successful. We would like to work with you to determine the best course of action in moving forward. We understand that we may need to petition the drainage board, but we do not know what existing knowledge you may have already in place to assist us. We also understand that there are multiple options available that need to be assessed for efficiency, suitability, and feasibility, such as a possible petition of village for a transfer of jurisdiction, which DeForest is currently undergoing with the drainage board. We ask you to share your knowledge of the process, laws, and regulations, as well as any insights and recommendations to guide us toward a successful outcome that we think will be beneficial not only to us but to the community. At a minimum, we ask you today that you commit to helping ensure the Bad Fish First Edition drainage area be properly assessed and subsequently maintained, that the area be thoroughly evaluated for further flood prevention and mitigation opportunities, and assurance that outcome-driven options to improve the Bad Fish First Edition drainage area will be supported if not directly pursued by the village.
Thank you. Can you leave a copy of that here?
Yes, I
with our
can.
clerk? Okay, so we have that. So I'll see what questions trustees may have right now. Are there more people who would like to speak? Did that cover what needs to be said? Okay, so if you need to, just raise your hand going forward, okay? Don't want to cut anybody out that might want to, but you seem to do a very thorough job.
Can I ask Jeff to kind of use a mouse and outline what area is being addressed here?
200 block, I believe, starts right at the railroad track, correct? Yes. Yep, and then it goes all the way out to the start of what we call Keller Alpine Park out here, correct? Is that the 500? Okay, yep.
Is it both sides of the
So,
street during that?
I'm not sure who's all represented here, but I know at least it looks to me like from people I know, it looks like most people are from the north side of the street, but are there anyone from the south side of the street here?
But it's affecting that.
No, I know, I'm just asking if there's anyone here from that part. Okay. So it looks like mostly this area here that I'm kind of drawing the cursor around.
Jeff, do you have any pictures of the Bad Fish First Edition drainage area? I was trying to Google that to see where all
I
it overlays.
don't, I mean, I have.
'Cause I haven't heard that
Yeah,
specific
so
term
let me-
before.
Let me zoom out here a little bit and kind of, I'll give you what, I can give you just some very basic information. Drainage districts were established many years ago. We're talking before turn of the century, some of them. And they were established because people wanted, at that time, could kind of dry up land. You could dry up land by either putting in drainage districts or drainage ditches or tiles, like pipes underground, that perforated pipes and the old clay pipes that would then effectively drain that water away, and then they could use that land for grazing, for farming, and that type of thing. So there's the Oregon Drainage District, which is this kind of a huge chunk that's over east of the village, and it kind of is, I'm just kind of generally circling it around over here. And then after the formation of this was a secondary drainage district, which kind of encompasses part of Cusick Parkway area, a lot of Lerner Park, Keller Alpine Park, and even well into this subdivision, which involves Walnut, Bur Oak Street, Ash, some portions of Lynn Trail, and that kind of thing. And so there's actually a lot of people that are in the drainage district that don't realize they're in the drainage district. It's just something that's been around for years. We looked at this maybe 2.5 years ago, I believe, 2 years ago, a little bit, and kind of determined that what I was able to determine at the time is it was a drainage district. It had not been active. It's still active, but it had not been, no one's been doing anything with it for probably 40 or 50 years. I don't have an exact date, but it's, originally, everything we have, this whole area, like Lerner Park and everything that's kind of flooded right now out there, used to be grazed and farmed. If you look like on some of the real old maps on Google Earth and everything like that, So this area obviously was tiled at one time, and you can see remnants of ditches and everything as you go in. Anytime you look at an aerial photo like this, and you see ditches that are perfectly straight, it's very indication that, obviously it's a man-made type of feature. And you can see where there were ditches that were dug. There's some over here. You see this one right here. You see one along here, or let's see, there's one along this fence line, I believe, and then this ditch over here. And those are all remnants of what was dug many years ago. Now, we can't really do that now, obviously, without significant permitting and stuff. But that's kind of where the drainage districts are and what knowledge we have of them. Does that kind of come close to kind of what you guys have found as well? Okay.
Jeff, can you, Drainage District Board?
Yes.
Who is
It's a state.
state?
Well, there's a state statutory framework
Okay,
that is rather old and archaic, but it still operates, and there are drainage, so there's a drainage board in Dane County
okay.
that has jurisdiction, both from an authority and responsibility standpoint, over these drainage districts, and could theoretically decide to undertake work in these drainage districts and then assess the costs to all the property owners within the district.
Okay,
Including the village.
Including the
okay,
village.
all right, thank you.
How does the Badfish Creek connect to the drainage district? And does the Badfish Creek come in at all from the west?
Well, I'm going to zoom out a little bit again here. So, wait till I get this. All right, so down here is Badfish Creek. This is the Oregon branch of the Badfish Creek, is the official term of it. And it terminates, as far as I can tell, pretty much right behind, I believe it's your property, isn't it? Kind of, you're on the very far end, 500 area?
503.
503, right. So it's very close to kind of right where it comes out of Keller Alpine Park. And that's the Badfish Creek. There are everything that we're dealing with, like we'll talk later on stuff, water that's coming from here and flooding the bike path. All of this water kind of funnels down to about this location, as well as everything from this side over here, or well, kind of actually Market Street and Main Street funnels down through this location, and it all goes here and into, I call it Lerner Park. One of the things that we are evaluating on an active basis right now is, and this is just a hypothesis of mine, but back when this drainage district was operating and maintained, there were canals and ditches through there that were actively maintained. I'm talking again probably 40, 50, 60 years ago. Since that time, we've relied strictly on, it's just continued to flow through these areas, but I think it's become less efficient over time, and that's why Lerner Park is always seemingly kind of flooded. And it's been flooded for as long as I can remember. There were some trails that were started back during the dry periods, and those are all flooded now too. So, but Jeff, to answer your question, it kind of comes down through this area here, and then eventually ties into either here or back over to here, and then into Badfish Creek. There's not a very good path for it right now, to be honest with you. And I don't know if that's just because when this was developed, it was never needed because it all infiltrated, or if it's just always kind of seeped through here and found its way back over to here. I just don't have that long-term history with that.
Don't you think the additional water that has come from the Bergamot and the Alpine that's out on that end of town has been contributing to our backyard water flow over the years?
Okay, just a minute, Jeff, excuse me. If people want to speak, that's fine, you should be recognized and then come to a microphone.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's not on the microphone, it's not picked up for TV. We also need it for public records, the
Right.
main thing, so.
I do have something quick to say.
Plus you get your minute on TV.
Tom McCann, live
Thank
on
you.
223 Jefferson Street, which is the second house in from the railroad. So Lori and I have lived there about 31 years, and I have a stormwater easement agreement right here between the village and the people that we bought our home from. It said that it would be properly maintained. So the years that we've lived there, we've never seen any maintenance. No mowing, no dredging, no riprapping, anything that told us somebody was working on it. We did notice that after the sanitary easement had been brought through our yards, that side had been maintained and just mowed, and that's it. So It seems like over the years, like when we first moved there, it was a trickle, it was a stream, typically what you guys would call a stream. Now, with all the building further out, it seems like all of that water goes through Oregon. Well, you guys know it does, heads right out to Stoughton. So what I was wondering on my end is stormwater management. It's something that most municipalities have in place, and it's when some developer, contractor, investor, somebody comes and says, we want to buy this parcel of land and build 20 homes over the next 5 years. They come to you guys, you give them permitting. I'm hoping, and I thought maybe I'd hear this, but I'm not sure. You guys say, okay, we have a stormwater management plan in place. The deposit that you're gonna have to give us is $10,000 per acre. You guys take that money, put it in the bank. When there's stormwater issues, you have money to play with and say, okay, we have to manage this better. Now, instead of this agreement that was from 1979, carrying the little bit of water from Wendy's house through the bridge to Quick Trip, now it's everybody east of us that has built since, and I know a lot of you guys are new in Oregon, but you two especially, you don't really know the history like we've known it because we've seen it and we've lived it.
Sure.
Every little bit of building that you guys accept out there is letting more stormwater come through because you got that asphalt roofs, concrete, sidewalks. It doesn't go into the ground anymore like the agriculture that you were stating. So it's been getting worse and worse each year, it seems like. So we're just looking for solutions.
Tom, I would love a copy of your stormwater maintenance or easement because that would be helpful as I look
All right.
as I look over this stuff because you know, these are things that sometimes just not on our radar.
Right.
And if
Nobody
that's-
else that we met with had any of this.
Okay, all right, and so, yeah, I'd like to see that. Can I keep this copy?
Absolutely.
Okay. And secondly, I think you're right on some issues with stormwater. The Village of Oregon has a very strong and robust stormwater management ordinance. Okay, it's not terribly outdated at all. In fact, it's fairly current, and it deals with stormwater in two ways. You know, your stormwater kind of happens in two ways: peak flow, okay, which is kind of that slug of water you get right off the bat, and then amount of runoff. Okay, and so you're correct that when development goes in and you have the extra asphalt and roofs and driveways and everything like that, you see more water run off that piece of land than you did before, okay, quantity-wise. What the stormwater management does is it takes that quantity, puts it in ponds and holding areas, and then, I don't want to say trickles it out, but it does in effect trickle it out over a much, much longer time period. Okay, so what you would see farther downstream was, you know, water, a longer duration of time. You're gonna see more water, you know, there's no doubt, that's just the nature of, you know, of development, but it's gonna be a much less peak than you would see during any other time. So that's kind of how the stormwater is handled. It has to be handled somehow. Very few subdivisions, and there are communities that do this, that say you have to have 100% containment, and it becomes, instead of a detention pond, it becomes a retention pond. So you're 100% retaining everything and no outlet. And that's not really feasible for really any development. The only time we see that happen is if it's an undrained area where it's really nowhere to drain. But, so that's a little bit on our stormwater ordinance and you know, what we require of developers. You know, I have been around, I've been in the village for almost 14 years, and so I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, especially in the last, you know, 10 years. And, you know, I would say that efforts taken by the village and village board over the last 10, 12 years, would you say?
Since 2007,
Since 2007,
That's when we
so
had
that's
it.
12 years.
a major flood.
Has done a significant improvement over, you know, we still see, and it doesn't mean that we don't ever see flooding or we don't ever see water in yards or something like that, but we aren't seeing the kind of flooding that we saw at that time, you know, because of the ponds and everything that are in place. So that's some of it there. And I know people have heard this to death, and I'm gonna try to get off my soapbox here, but we have a tremendous amount of water everywhere in the village. And that's in people's yards and people's sump pumps. low-lying areas of the village, our bike path, our parks, I mean, you just kind of drive around and sometimes it looks, some of these areas are very low, and our people's sump pumps are running every minute, every 30 seconds. And it's happening throughout the entire village, regardless of really where you are, unless you happen to be up on a hill or something like that. And I've talked to a lot of residents along this area and in other areas. We just have a lot of water in the groundwater table right now. And it's, I think one of the things that is occurring in your area there is it's quite honestly, that's where it starts to daylight. It's where the ground starts to plane out and it's starting to daylight. I have not taken an in-depth look at the creek, and so I'm not gonna sit there and say it's is or isn't being maintained or is restricting anything, but I'm not surprised at all that we're seeing springs spring up in places that we haven't had springs, and we haven't had water before. So, and I don't necessarily blame any development based off of that because, technically you're gonna have less infiltration with development. So I think it's more of a fact that we have had not only one of the wettest years last year, since 1884, I believe, but prior to that we had a wet year, and then prior to that year we had another wet year. We've just had this kind of compounding, and we're seeing it everywhere with this, ponds that are higher and areas that are higher, much higher than they've ever been.
Did you have anything else?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And we have another person who had a hand up, so if you come to the microphone, please.
He addressed what I was gonna say.
Are you sure?
Sure.
Okay, I don't want you to feel intimidated by the microphone.
Probably.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Steve, there's a question back here.
Yes.
Good evening. I'm Roy Spock. I live at 399 Jefferson. And just to put it on the record, I have 2 sump pumps, and one of them runs constantly. I move over 4,000 gallons of water a day through my sump system. And we bought the house 3 years ago, and we're told, we got this white pipe behind our house that the sumps are pumped into. And they said, you don't have any problem because the water goes down that pipe and out to that magnificent drain field in the park behind.
To the creek. It's supposed to go to the creek.
Well, okay, wherever it goes.
Yeah.
And just to say, I'm pumping 4,000 gallons a day, and if you look in that park behind me, that's just a sponge out there.
Correct.
So that water isn't getting absorbed by, I don't know if it's making the creek or not.
Yeah, that system, there's a system that when we did the Florida Avenue home buyout and kind of took out Florida Avenue, there was a system that was installed back there of white PVC pipe and perforated pipe that ran from the backs of these homes along Jefferson Street to the creek. And some people have utilized those, some people didn't even know it existed back there. We had a utility company come in last year and actually crushed several locations, so one of our items that we have first thing this spring when we can get back there with equipment is to repair those, and make sure that people can utilize those. And I know like with Patty's, I think we've gone back and had to kind of repair some before, but it is a system, it's not a perfect system because it's very shallow and it's, there's just not a lot of fall. Why Florida Avenue was ever approved by anything in the first place, I don't think anyone would remember or know, but it's proof that that whole area was not suitable for development anyways, yeah. But you're exactly right.
I just wanted to make it a point of record that I'm moving a lot of water, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
Right.
So Royce, I have a question.
Yes,
You've been there 3 years?
yes.
How much did it pump the first year you were there? Has that changed?
Well, I've got 2 pumps. One pump runs every 8 to 10 minutes, 24 hours, 365 days a year. The other pump runs probably half that amount. And I don't recall, maybe the first year we were there, it running quite as much.
Yeah.
But to me, I mean, I hardly hear it anymore because I'm so used to it.
Sure.
But it just, runs constantly. I mean, that's a lot of water,
That's a lot of water.
you know, and for all I know, it's pumping it back into my yard and coming right back in.
Yeah.
There's probably some of that happens, yeah. And keep in mind, actually, to the credit, there, during the winter months, you know, well, in this situation, you can always pump it to the backyard, but there's other residents where they don't have that option to really pump it to the yard in the middle of winter, and they can't pump it to the street, and so that's when it has to go into the sanitary sewer with our permission, and that's just clear water we're pumping into our system. So, long-term, I will say this, I mean, long-term, and Mike and I have sat in meetings and talked about this before, is as we move forward, I truly believe we're headed to a wetter climatological time period. And so as we look at subdivisions that are maybe more susceptible to situations like what you're experiencing, that we would look for systems that more reliable systems like what you have in the backyard to dump into year-round and go to the storm sewers and the creeks.
You know, it doesn't make any difference what season it is, this pump runs all the time.
Right. Oh, I understand. But I mean, you have to be able to get rid of it year-round. And in the winter, sometimes running things out into the yard doesn't work.
Well, mine all goes underground, it all
Yeah.
goes disappears, but I don't know where it goes or when it comes back and say howdy, you know?
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Royce. Yes. No, you've had your hand up.
He can go first.
Okay.
State your name and who you work for.
Don Gray, 235 Jefferson. I moved in, I think, around 2006, and when I had first moved in there, Lerner Park was bone dry. I used to walk my kids through the park there all the time. 2007, after the flood, my basement flooded, the backyard was flooded. It seemed to alleviate itself. These last few years, it's gotten consistently worse, that I had to put a sump pump in my basement to pump out the water. I think, actually I'm 99% sure, but when we get these heavy floods, it's all hitting that pond out by Alpine and Jefferson Street. There's so much silt getting through there from the construction that it has silted that creek all the way back to the railroad bridge. So now my backyard sits with water standing year-round. I can't mow it. I have a weeping willow back there that 2 of the trunks have broke. I have one currently broke right now across the creek that the only way I'm going to get it out is a helicopter because there's no way to get to it. It's soaking wet back there. And there's no doubt in my mind, there's at least 2 to 3 feet of silt in that creek. And it just has to be dredged. I don't know what you got to do to get it out, but there was a time, I'm trying to think of what year it was, the drought year, that you could see the silt in it. The creek was dry.
2012, Don, probably.
Yeah, the creek was dry, and you could see how much silt was in it. But nothing was being done about it then. So I really think if we get the silt out, it'll naturally lower our yards. And, you know, I'm trying to think. I think I went 18 inches in my backyard when I put in a clothesline pole. Now they fall over. I mean, they're standing. It's a miracle, but the backyard is just sopping wet. And last summer, it didn't get mowed at all. When I tried to mow it, and my neighbor can attest, we've had to push our lawnmowers out, pull them out, because they sink. So I really think the silt is an issue. I think there's a lot more silt in there than people realize. And the silt is flowing through. When you get 4 inches of rain, that silt isn't settling until it slows. And it's slowing right before that railroad bridge. And I think that whole thing is just full of silt. I'm positive. That's all I got.
And that type of thing, you know, it's nice to hear that's a potential solution to look at.
Well, and
That's what you do,
I
as
really
Tanner
think
said,
if-
look together to
Right.
find some solutions to this, so.
You know, and being I cleaned drains for 20 years, that's a big drain to clean. I don't know an apparatus that would do it, but my understanding is the county was doing it in certain areas for cricks and stuff like this with this issue. So I don't know if we could get advice from the county as to what we could do, you know, to try and get that water or get that silt out so the water lowers itself naturally. Because it's just, and it's actually, I would say, well, my burn pit's still back there. The water is up to the burn pit. So, and it just doesn't drain away
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think it's going to until something is done as far as getting that silt out of there.
Yeah. I saw Jeff taking some notes, so I'm guessing that's to
Well,
look into
the
the silt and
county
look at
has a
that some more.
program that they've been doing called Suck the Muck, and it's kind of a catchy name, that's what made me remember it. That is primarily dealing with phosphorus, legacy sediments and legacy phosphorus in sediments, which is not really a problem. We don't have the phosphorus component in this area because we don't have a lot of ag upstream. But yeah, they've been doing some removal of the high phosphorus sediment. I don't know if they've ever been dealing with it as far as an infiltration, to improve infiltration. But it's entirely possible. I don't have the history of prior to Alpine or Keller Alpine Park and that type of stuff. The ponds upstream should be effective in getting the sediment out. In fact, the criteria in designing a sediment retention pond is actually for a 0.2 micron particle, which if you ever have some 0.2 micron stuff in your hand, it is literally like talcum powder. So that is the and it's almost impossible. It's a crazy criteria that DNR has set forward in settling velocities in ponds, and that's what the ponds are designed for. But if ponds aren't maintained or something like that, they could release. But before ponds became a major issue, which was like when all this area south of your street and everything. What is your subdivision here?
Hickory Court.
Hickory. No. Is it?
Yeah, it's Hickory subdivision.
Hickory subdivision. When all that was, we don't have ponds on, as many
Right.
ponds on those things, and so it might have been something that occurred 25 years ago.
Yeah, the
Could
first-
saturation move dirt into the pond? Could the saturation of the land around the creek move dirt, topsoil,
No.
or under dirt,
No.
dirt under the grass?
Not. I mean, it takes a significant velocity to move. It's obviously the faster the velocity, the faster the particle that can be carried in that flow. But my experience in groundwater engineering is no, that would not silt something in from groundwater seeping in.
Does it make sense that if we dug the Badfish Creek deeper or dug it out, that it would move water better? Or that it would drain the land around it, in your mind, or does that need more study?
That would need more study. Yeah, we'd have to look at where. See, right now, I don't know if, I never see the creek go down, and like you're saying, and I don't know if that's because of a constriction at the railroad bridge. I'm pretty confident that we don't have a constriction at the culvert. We improved that culvert 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago.
2008.
When you retire, we're going to lose all these dates, but 2008 when we redid the, you go down to that inlet at Quick Trip, and it's not necessarily backing it up into the area, but there might be some constricted areas that we're not aware of through there. But I think like Mike and I were talking about, that we have difficulty if we don't have easements across something, and it's not part of village property. We really don't have the right to go in unless we're granted that right by people to go in and take care of that. So that's where we have to be kind of careful. Now, if everyone along here comes together and grants an easement to the village to be able to do that, that might be, I'd welcome that. I think, anytime you can get to something and maintain it, it's going to be better for all parties.
Just a second now. Any more questions or comments from the trustees right now? I don't want to have questions go if they have some. Okay.
But the only thing I wanted to add is I understand what Jeff's talking about with sediment not getting through those ponds. But the ponds actually overflowed. I mean, this spring, it went over the bike path. And I'm pretty sure when them heavy rains last summer, it did as well. A lot of the development, Bergamot development stuff, I know they put storm catches in and stuff like that. But that sediment, even as fine as that stuff is, I'm positive has flowed through there. And this is just over a period of time. It's not one storm. We've had so many heavy storms that this sediment is just slowly accumulated in there to the point that I think if I went out there and put hip waders on, I'm going to need help getting out because there's that much muck and sediment built up in there. And I really think it's to the railroad bridge because if you watch the flow of it, at least when I watched the flow of it from Market Street, looking to the south, it seems to be constricted a little bit past the railroad bridge. It would be on the east side. But that west side is just not getting there fast enough, in my opinion.
You're saying it's
So-
restricted, you think, over in this area, Don?
Yeah, just
This is the
past
railroad bridge
yep,
here.
just past the railroad bridge. It seems constricted there, but I really think it's not getting from that railroad bridge back to 503. It's just not moving through there like it used to at all. And of course, I think that sediment is creating an artificial layer of groundwater, and that's why the yards are holding that water. I think if we could get that water moving better, the yards would drain off, they would dry up, and you might be able to grow grass there again, because I think it's killing all the vegetation back there right now. It's just, I'm pretty sure it killed my willow. It's
It's hard to kill a willow, too.
and it's huge, yeah. And it's broken off 3 times, and it's right next to the creek, literally right next to it. So, and I really don't. I hope it falls over, but getting it out is a problem. I'm tired of dealing with it. It's a messy, nasty.
Can you burn it back there?
I'd like to. I'd like to.
Sorry, that was.
I heard there was an exception on that when I was told there was none, but we'll talk about that another day.
Go ahead.
You were mentioning maybe we need to have an easement allowed, even is the one that exists for the storm drain that was put in a few years ago? Is
The
that-
sanitary easement?
Yeah, is that enough of an easement, or do you?
My gut feeling, normally when an easement like that is written, it's strictly for a specific, like, care and maintenance of a specific item, and normally therefore it's for the care, maintenance, repair, replacement, and whatever of sanitary line or something like that. I would think we'd have to look towards some easement that would give us, a creek and a little bit beyond, because you have to be equipment in there. And I haven't had a chance to read Tom's
Yep,
thing.
so
I'm
once
very
you read
intrigued by
this, don't you think there's an easement agreement in place with everybody? I mean, maybe
Well,
you'd like to read this out loud
we-
to everybody, because I find it very interesting.
Well, we would look into, seeing this, I would start looking into a title search on some other properties to see if there are similar easements, because that's the thing that would show up on if anyone's gone through it. Let's see, who was it just moved here? Yes. So, you might want to look in your title company packets and see if you find anything in there that lists any kind of easements.
Nobody else. Mike, don't you know if the village ever had one of these?
I remember that time, yeah.
No, you've been here long enough. I thought maybe you.
No, I don't remember that.
You'd think the village would have a copy of everybody's stormwater easement agreement somewhere in a file.
It's
And I know
possible.
everything's going digital, so it's probably
It's possible that we do.
So
We
what
just
what
haven't
year is
seen
that
them.
from? 70?
1979.
Yeah.
79,
Yeah.
But since it's a body of water, do we even have any, is it ours to even grant permission, or would it be this
We-
drainage district?
Yeah, I'd say, Mike, that's what we need to do. We need to talk about the involvement of the drainage district
Yeah.
before we can just start to go in there and start removing silt. So, I mean, my suggestion is, I think this should get referred to a committee, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of detail that we should be talking about, and we need to talk about the environment of the district. And,
Yeah. So our attorney has a comment, and we'll come to a couple more hands and look at going to Public Works Committee. So, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, my comment is that the whole purpose of the drainage district and the drainage board is to do the kind of work that you're talking about, in terms of, for example, maintaining that drain so that it drains properly. It sounds like there are definitely questions that someone's going to want to look into to determine exactly what the problem is and what solution would or would not be effective. Someone would want to do that, I think, before making a significant investment in starting down some path. But as I understand it, at least today, the drainage board has the authority to maintain that drain. They don't need easements from anyone. They already have the authority to do that. I don't know what their attitude will be about exactly what to do and when to do it and how to do it and so on. And then, there's a cost component. And as I understand it, if they do decide to undertake a project in there, then the people who are property owners in the district, including the village as a property owner, would be subject to some assessment. So that avenue is maybe the the simplest in some ways in terms of, it takes advantage of a structure that's already in place. If there is a desire to change that and say, well, instead of working through the drainage board,
Well,
have the
I-
village take over, then a different structure would need to be put in place.
Who just, is it Tanner?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, Tanner's right. The forest is going through a procedure to remove part of its village out of the drainage system. To remove,
Are they trying to terminate the drainage district or assume responsibility for it?
I think, terminate it.
So it's my understanding that part of Wisconsin Act 115, it made some modifications to the authorities within the Drainage Board. They made the modifications to the Drainage Board handbook. And one of the options I think that might be worth considering, and why I wanted to present this to you all, is that there is the option to gain some of that jurisdictional authority from the Drainage Board, by the village itself, should that be something that is beneficial for the community, given that the stakeholders are here, residents within the community, and the Drainage Board may not have our best interests in mind to begin with.
I would agree.
Okay, we had a couple more hands, so let's get to those.
I'm Wendy LaChelle, I'm in 503. I'll tell you just a couple things. First of all, while you see us from Jefferson Street, if you talk to the neighbors over there, this problem is emulating way out, and people are being quiet about putting drain tile in, they're dealing with mold and what have you, but I had a friend of mine said they drove by all-color automotive, and they were parked in whatever that painting place is, were parked in the street because their lot was flooded. And this whole thing, I mean, I'll give you credit, you came out in 2017 and looked at my property. It's much, much worse.
I think of you every time I drive by and look at your backyard.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, but the problem here is, all these people that built and what have you, when the ground was dry, and I mean, I wouldn't have bought the place, and I bought in '03, and I mean, I had a 60-year-old black walnut back there that does not grow in water. And I mean, I think it's the drainage board, yes, but the village too. But I think there has to be a sense of urgency, because this is going from bad to worse. I mean, I talked to Tom Stair down there, and he said when the worst flooding, he had water up to his front door. And I think it's either we all get together and find what we can do, not what we can't do, or you're going to have parts of Oregon that have been tenable for years that maybe aren't tenable anymore. And you're talking about the buildup down there. When they were doing the road, I was talking to the guys. We got friendly. They were borrowing my stuff, and we were going back and forth. And they got down to somewhere down by the Burr Oak down there, and they'd come back and they just said, oh man, the water's standing, the whole thing's clogged. It's just totally clogged up down there. So, I mean, we've got some serious problems, and hopefully everybody's going to come and say, hey, this is real. Is it going to cost money? Yeah. But, you want to just toss your property away? And if you're going to build Oregon, you can build schools, you can build other stuff, and if it's flooded out, if the downtown's flooded out, I mean, all that money didn't do any good. And I did go to a drainage board thing, and I did some learning and some other stuff. And the one guy that was on the drainage board that really knew what he was talking about, and it always sticks in my mind, he said, well, the water does head towards the downtown. So if we get flooded, that's where it's heading, and that is just hopefully that everybody just says, okay, it's real, we got to do something, and with a sense of urgency, or you're going to have residents that are displaced, and it's a lot easier to spend the money to solve the problem before we make national TV with some sort of major cleanup effort, and who wants to be emergent management, so that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Real quick. My name is Patricia Hill, and I live at 427 Jefferson Street. And I bought my house, I think, around 1996, 1999. And when I first moved in, I had one sump pump. It never pumped at all, ever. In 2007, when we flooded in the area and they took the homes out on Florida Avenue, it did its thing. It took care of it. It was done. The houses were gone. The pumping stopped. With the development that has gone out on the side of town going outward, my pump has probably ran between 3 and 5 minutes with that new development going out in that area. Since the road went in, in, was it 2017 or whatever, my pump has, since the road went in, and I don't know if it's coincidence to the rise in the groundwater at that time, but my pump is running between every 1 to 2 minutes, 24/7, 365. And I can bring you my utility bills to show you the increase in use equivalent to the pump. I am putting in a new sump pump. If everything goes as correct, I'm gonna add an additional one this Friday. They're scheduled to come out, and it's not exactly the cheapest thing, but I feel I have to do that to maintain my own home. And that's really, I don't know all the answers, but I can definitely tell you that the 24/7, 365 has increased exactly at the same time that road went in. So I don't know if that comes into play with it or anything, if there's any hard pans or things that got broken in the road. Water's gonna find a place to go wherever it can, so I don't know if the material that was under there was tighter packed and the water didn't, flow as. I don't have the answers, but I just want to tell you different things that I've seen over the course of years that I've been at my residence. So I've gone from never running to 24/7, like Roy said, I live next to Roy, 24/7, 365 right now, about every 2 minutes.
Okay.
And it's not very comforting to leave your home
Yeah,
and
I'm
go
sure.
any place
Yeah.
and feel, I mean, right to a point, there was a time I'm starting to relax a little bit more about it, but I'd get up in the morning, run down and make sure the pump was going. I'd go to work and the first thing I'd do is come home and run home and make sure it was running before I'd go and do anything. That's just
Yeah,
not
that's not
exactly
fun.
a
No.
fun way to live,
No,
so.
that's not fun.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
So we had a gentleman in the third row. You still want to speak? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Just a couple quick things. One of the things that Roy
We
mentioned
need
before-
your name and address, please.
Nicholas James White. I live at 211 Jefferson Street. That's a lot louder, closer. So one of the things that Roy had mentioned is since he moved here 4 years ago, he had noticed that there was considerable more water getting pumped out of his sump pump from that time. When I moved in here 12 years and 8 months ago, I was able to jump across the creek. Back then, I had a couple of 12-foot boards that were a bridge, so I could get to the second half of my land. Now, a 30-foot bridge wouldn't cover it. It would end up getting floated downstream anyway. And I just wanted to have that on record, like Roy had said. And then the other thing that I had mentioned that I don't think has been brought up to this point, and something that I'd like to have noted or at least considered, is that I believe the drainage district ends at Netherwood. It kind of runs the gambit around Netherwood to Alpine, down Jefferson, and then starts to all flow down the Badfish Creek drainage area. One of the things that I think really bothered me when I was out of town is that I heard that there was a tremendous amount of water that was getting pumped from the north side of Netherwood to the south side of Netherwood, and those are not in the same drainage districts. That's just something I think should be looked at for future reference if we're going to end up having a flood situation where we need to alleviate and pump the water to another area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It is the same drainage area. Drainage district is different from drainage area, but it's all tributary to the same, the amount tributary to the Oregon branch of the Badfish Creek is huge.
Okay. So I think we'll take one more comment, then we'll choose our next plan.
I own 429 Jefferson Street. My name is Vicki Moser.
Okay.
And I now have 3 sump pumps in our property, and they are running consistently. Has changed dramatically since 2008, 2007, when we had the major flood. I've redone my basement several times. I have put drain tile in. I've re-landscaped. And I would love to be able to get hooked up like Patty is, so that because it's flooding my backyard and I can't mow either, so.
Okay, thank you. So I think Mike's recommendation was to refer this to Public Works. So how that works, our committees are the ones where a lot of the actual work takes place, discussions take place, and then the results of that discussion come to the board. So we want to certainly meet tonight, hear what folks had to say, and then get into more detail and start to look at some plans and so on as you work with Jeff and the Public Works Committee. Just three of the trustees will be on Public Works. So that would be the next option. Does that sound, other ideas, does that sound okay?
Tanner is waiting to hear back from the drainage,
Yeah.
county drainage
Yeah.
district. if they contact us, or if any of us speak to them, what is the process with the village to sort of coordinate the three of us, the homeowners, the village, and them? Because
Send it
they
to
may
me.
have the authority.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Send
I
it
would
to me.
suggest, if you get information from the drainage district, that come to Jeff right away.
Absolutely.
I
I'd
wouldn't,
love
I would
to
not
get
wait
that
until a meeting. Get that to him, he can look it over, he can analyze that, and be ready to speak to that when the Public Works meeting comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, if you
That
have
sound
any
all right?
contacts, or if you think it'd be beneficial that we call them, please let me know. Like I said, we looked into it a few years ago and really kind of hit a dead end with it. And so if you find yourself getting somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a contact there, let Jeff know too, it'd be pretty to talk to, so.
Internet, maybe have a
Yeah.
And
website.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes from there.
We would shoot-
Contact Jeff.
Yeah.
Find out.
Probably shoot for a May,
Yep.
Public Works.
Yep.
Is what I would think. I don't have that date. I mean, that's normally would be the 27th, but that's Memorial Day.
We'll have to find a different date for
Yeah,
that.
so it might
May,
be-
may just be that Tuesday then.
Right, that Tuesday or the following week in June or something.
Yes.
But it'll be on the website, right?
Yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
we'll be letting people know, and I'm sure you've got a kind of a contact or an email or some way to get a hold of everyone too.
And just for the record, so the resources that I provided you, Mr. Statton, one of those was all of the Drainage District Board members' phone numbers
Oh, okay.
and contact
Okay.
information.
Super.
Okay, thank you. And just so you know, after next Monday, I won't be here. I didn't run again, so
They'll
Jeannie
be on
Clark will
that
be taking
side
over, so.
complaining and about stuff we're doing, I'm sure.
I've told her to save the problems until May, so. Thank you, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate the respectful, let's work together, find solutions type approach. That's how things get done the best in this community. I think this board has a good track record of doing it that way, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Yep, see ya.
Okay, so that takes us to item 3B, and that item is discussed with David Ferris from Ellers regarding 2019 borrowing review of pre-sale report for $2,700,000 of general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2019B, and review of pre-sale report for $875,000 general obligation promissory notes, Series 2019A, and possible action on these resolutions. So, Mr. Ferris, welcome, and
Thank
you
you.
now know a lot about stormwater.
Well, you know, last year was garbage in the yards. This year is drainage, so
Yeah.
I get an education when I come here. I thought they'd stay and listen. You know.
You've at least missed the
I'm pretty
dumpster
excited,
discussions.
you know. So, well, thank you for letting Ellers be your municipal advisor and letting me present your pre-sale reports tonight, your capital planning for 2019. As you probably know, we worked with staff over, probably the last 3 months or so, kind of nailing down the capital list and determining what the financing, what best to use for financing. And so we come here tonight with what's called a pre-sale report. And what the pre-sale reports are is really a way to document or memorialize how we, what the purpose of the financing is and what the planning was that went into it. So this is the document that kind of pulls it all together before we go to market for the sale. I'll start with the bonds, the B issue. So the first pre-sale report, I don't know what your page number is.
Is that, yeah, you let me know what page you want me to be on for this.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with what would be page 1 of the 2,700,000.
Back on right here?
Yep.
Okay.
No, that's the note. Is it farther up?
It's probably after that.
Oh, did you put them in? I can start with the notes too, if it's easier.
Go, we'll find a bond.
There we go.
Right
This
there.
one?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. So on page 1, which is the next page actually, this is the general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2019B. The purpose of this issue is to finance some of your 2019 capital projects, more of the long-term type of assets, the street construction, some of the assets that last a longer period of time, and that are allowable by state statutes, because there's actually some limits on what bonds can be used for. The type of projects that you have in the bond issue is street projects, fire department equipment, public works building, park projects, and a leaf collector. In addition to that, there are some identified TID 4 projects and some wastewater utility projects. If you turn to page, let's see, if you want to go down to 7, I think is where I would like you to go. That should be the capital list. One back up. There you go. On page 7 is the capital listing. So staff and others have kind of gone back and forth on this list a few times, and we've nailed it down to what staff wanted to put forward as far as capital projects this year. The way this schedule is laid out is you've got the item, the fund that will pay for the item, the type of funding source, and then the amount. And then at the bottom of that, I have a sum of what those numbers pull into as far as the notes and bonds. And I think you're talking about the state trust fund loan after I'm done. But I probably will stick around for that as well. But that's on this listing as well, but you'll talk about that in the next item. So back on page 6, if you go backwards a little, there you go. The numbers that you saw at the bottom of page 7 pull into this schedule. So I'll kind of talk about the notes and bonds as far as this stuff goes right now, because the next pre-sale report is basically a duplicate. There's a couple things that are a little different, and I'll highlight those when we get to the notes. But the amounts on the schedule from page 7 at the bottom, you'll see the project needs the $836,000 and the $2,006,000. I should agree with that bottom of page 7. When you add on the issuance expenses, we end up with a sizing for the notes of $875,000 and for the bonds $2.7 million. Going on to page 8. This is the repayment schedules by the purpose, or basically the financing source. So the amounts that were for capital projects are levy oriented, and so the property tax levy will fund those. The sewer utilities breakout will be paid by sewer utility user fees, and TIF 4 will be paid by the TIF increment generated in that TIF. Then the next page. It's a little small, you have to squint a little bit, but what this does is this is a schedule that kind of shows, in the white on the left, is kind of where we are before the borrowings, and then what as you go across the page, it ends up being something where we use this to solve for the debt service tax rate, because the one thing we want to do when we structure your debt is to have a debt service tax levy that doesn't bounce up and down, because as the staff probably knows, the more the debt levy bounces around, the more complaints people have, or more comments they have when they walk in the door. I was used to that when I was in Wanakee. You knew when they weren't happy, because even if it was a school's fault, you still got to hear the comments. So the way you read this schedule is on the second column on the left is the equalized value. 2018 and 19 are actual amounts, so you had really nice growth between 18 and 19. Then the numbers after that are projections. Staff and Eller staff kind of discuss what would be a good amount to have going forward, a conservative amount. We don't want to put too much in there, because if it doesn't happen, that it kind of makes our debt service tax rate to the right kind of look kind of crazy, and we don't want to project something that overstates what your growth is. So we try to stay conservative. We gave you the percentages that we're increasing there. The next column over is your total principal and interest that you have on your existing issues. And that next column is revenues that come from those other sources, like I mentioned before, the sewer utility or the water utility or the TIF districts. And then that gets you down to the existing tax or debt service levy amount. You take that amount divided by the equalized value, and that's basically what your existing debt would have for an equalized tax rate going forward. Then the next two columns, the pinkish orange color, is the two issues that you're considering tonight. There are components of that have other funding sources, the water, sewer, and 2 different TIF districts, depending on the issue. And then you get down to what the new debt service related amounts are. You add that to the debt service tax levy from the left, and you get the overall tax levy amount that you'll have when these issues, or if these issues are approved. We've kind of demonstrated that we've structured the debt in such a way that your levy is going down over time, and the debt service tax rate does that as well. And the reason that we do that is to give you flexibility to do the projects that you have planned in the future. So that's kind of that schedule in a nutshell. Does anybody have a question on that schedule? All right, Jeff, I'm going to take you way back to page 1.
Go back to the bond, or the...
Yeah, page 1 with all the words.
Yep.
Yeah.
You want to go back to page 1 of that?
Yep. Oh, you're in the notes right now. I should go down again, to the other way. Stop. Whoa.
Here we go.
You're almost there, right there. Okay, so where it said term and call feature, just there, right there. Okay. So middle of the page, the bonds are being issued for a period of 18 years. Principal will be due every March 1st from 2020 to 2037. The bonds actually have a call date, though, of March 1st of 2027. So if it makes good financial sense at that time and rates are really, really low, because right now they're pretty low, you have the option on that date or any date forward to prepay those bonds or basically refund those bonds at that better interest rate, which could save the village money. So at that time, the village will and analyze those things, and as the village staff knows, annually we're looking at opportunities to refinance for you anyways, and we send out information that says that we've looked at stuff and try to point out what might be a good possibility to save you some money. A little farther down on the page is the rating. Right now you're a AA2 with Moody's Investor Service. We will do a conference call with village staff and other staff probably the week of May 13th-ish. We'll have Moody's ask all their questions. Village staff will provide a lot of answers as far as how the financials look, what we're going to do in the future, what's the growth look like. Basically put on our best show as far as how we're looking financially, and hopefully they'll come back with affirming, or I don't know if we're at the point where we'll be able to get an upgrade. I think probably you have a little bit to go on growth as far as your equalized value. I think it's about $2 billion these days that gets you to AA1, if I recall. So it takes a little bit of work, and you're growing. So it's one of these days they'll have to consider you. On page 2, under method of sale, for both the notes and the bonds, these will be sold on a competitive basis, which means that the national, regional, and local underwriters will have a chance to bid on it. I think in the past we've had times where Bankers Bank has won the bid, and they usually work with a local bank, and if that happens, we will definitely bring that out at the meeting if the local bank is part of the winning bid. On page 3, towards the bottom, under risk factors. There you go. So we have to point out to you what the risk factors might be. So general obligation debt is basically secured by the property tax. If the sewer utility, in this case, if the sewer utility and the TIF district do not have enough funding on hand to pay for that, the village is required to issue or to levy taxes to pay for those. Our hope is that the sewer utility you're keeping an eye on those rates, and you always have enough money to pay the sewer utility's share, and that the TIF district is doing well, and hopefully that you're getting enough growth in those that won't be an issue. But we're required to point that out to you because it could affect your levy in the future. And then on bottom of page 4 and onto bottom page 3 onto page 4 is the cast of characters that also has a hand on this issue. Your bond counsel has been Quarles and Brady. Your paying agent is Bond Trust Services, and your rating agency at this time is Moody's Investor Service. On page 5 is the calendar of events. We're here today to present the pre-sale reports. We will have a call when the official statement is actually published and out. Staff will have a chance to review that. We actually will have a call with staff to go through the official statement and make sure it's accurate and complete. And then we'll have that rating call with Moody's that same week. And then we'll sell the bonds May 20th at that meeting. And then on June 13th, we'll actually have the money for you so you can start to pay for your projects or equipment, whatever it may be. So if you have any questions on the bonds, the B issue, I can take those right now.
Are there questions,
Can
anybody?
can you talk a little bit more about TIF 4 and the importance of the TIF district to grow so that the cost of these bonds doesn't flow over to the levy?
Do you want to?
TIF 4 is the one down by the old motel, and that is underperforming. So the chances that the TIF is going to pay its full share of the debt is unlikely. I'm just being honest with you. And part of it is because some of the property inside the TIF the value's gone down.
So do we have a model to predict what the impact on the levy would be as a result of TIF 4 underperforming?
We do have built into the base, and you have to remind me, Lisa, which TIF districts are coming into the calculation.
TIF 4 is the one that's going to do the Janesville Street, Park Street intersection. And TIF 5 is the one that doesn't impact us. That's the Ticey State Trust Fund loan. So it's just TID 4. And when we created the TID, we assigned some of the expense of that intersection to TID 4. Whether or not the TID can pay for it, we'll have to see over time. But right now, the village is actually having to levy money in that TID every year just to pay the expenses within the TID.
And just so you know, our base model, so that portion of the schedule that I was going through that had the existing amounts in it, there is a calculation that we've worked with staff that does include a projection of how much tax levy those TIF districts, correct?
That's,
I don't have that schedule in front of me, but we have taken that into account where we're trying to predict how much that shortfall might be.
and that's one of the discussions we had with the board, Jeff, when we were trying to decide how much money to give the new hotel. We're juggling, well, the hotel is going to generate increment, and we were saying the staff was saying to the board, well, should we try to keep at least some of that increment for projects like this? Because it turned out the developer needed all the increment back, because the TID really is going to run out in 2035, I think. I was got on my.
Is that the mandatory
It's
close?
2035, yep.
So I'm sure you have at least a 3-year extension you might be able to pull there, and I don't remember.
So Elders always recommends that we run these projects through the TID if it's available, just in case at some point during the life of a TID, it can actually pay itself back, so.
Yeah, there's cases where, you might end up getting growth and it might be able to pay for some of those costs. And I don't know if we've looked at TIF sharing type of scenarios at this point.
We did
but
that one
those
time
might
before.
be some things that-
Yeah. Right now, we couldn't do that. We did it with TID 2, which closed a couple of years ago. Did that answer your question, Jeff, or?
Well, the question was, what's the impact on the levy going to be? We didn't answer that.
Oh, sorry.
We said that it would impact the
It
levy.
is, it's going to,
And we
yeah.
said that we don't know
Yeah.
how much it's going to impact, and that it could be more or less in 3 years. Because if the TID district closes.
Right now, the way that the TID is flowing, unless we get a project in there that surprises us, this debt service is going to hit the general levy. I'm just, to answer your question.
Is there any way, because as I'm being asked to decide whether or not I want to vote for us to engage in this bond sale, I'm trying to think about the impacts of that decision, and one of those impacts is the levy. Is there any way for me to be able to say it's going to be 1%, it's going to be 0.5%? You've got I forget the terminology used, but the way I interpreted it was the average value of a property in the Village of Oregon times the numbers of properties in the Village of Oregon, that gave you that 0.81% impact on the levy.
Sure.
So is there a way for you to say that if when TID 4 can't contribute at all, add another 0.04, or
I don't have that in front of me today. I can get that for you.
is it marginal like that, or is it double
Well, this issue
0.81?
didn't have much to it, but you're already, the levy amount for the shortfall has already been included into the tax rate that we have right now. And I don't have that
And
in front of me.
and we're only charging 25% of the intersection to TID 4. So it's not, it's in the scheme of things, it's not, it's a small part of the debt service we're taking out. So even if TID was paying for it, it may have an impact, but it's not going to be too dramatic, I don't believe.
I can definitely, we can probably
Sure.
pull something
Yep.
together for
Sure.
you that shows you how much that is at this point, though.
So Mike, you feel you'll be comfortable with the potential impact? That's what it sounds like.
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I thought.
Yep.
I know you're very cautious about
Yep. Mhm.
that staying at a certain amount as
Yep.
time goes
Mhm.
forward, so, okay.
And we've reviewed the projects with, these are reviewed during the 2019 budget process with the board, and then what Dave was talking about is that we just tweaked a few numbers as we got closer to going out.
Yeah, okay. Are there any more questions or comments from trustees? Anything else to add right now, or are we ready to vote on these resolutions?
As far as the bonds go, if you want to handle the resolutions for the bonds right now,
Yeah.
that would be it.
Okay, so I'll-
And if you would, just to be safe, do it by roll call, that would be great.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to.
Well, maybe we should do, Steve, is just have David do an overview of the notes and then just do all the resolutions at one time.
Yeah, so then we can do
Yeah.
item 9 also, right?
So just do
Yeah,
that.
and actually, since I went through the
notes
bonds and the notes
Yeah.
basically at the same time, I'll
Yep.
just hit the highlights on the notes part.
Yeah,
So, yeah, go down to page 1 then. Yep. So this is the General Obligation Promissory Notes, Series 2019A. The amount of this issue is $875,000, and it's used to finance the rest of the capital projects plan, which are usually items that are, maybe the useful value is less than 10 years, or this amounts are small enough, or they cannot be, the debt can't be bonds because of state statutes. So in this issue, there's some equipment, could involve like computers and mowers and things like that. Some of the street projects are more maintenance in nature, and then some, I believe the general building improvement is police oriented. Also involved in this is some TID 5 projects, water utility projects, and wastewater utility projects. Under term call feature, these.
Real quick, if we can just pause for a quick minute, can you tell me what projects in TID 5 are affected by the issuance of the notes, Jeff? You said wastewater and,
I have to look at the list.
So TID 5 is actually, I believe, some downtown wayfinding signs.
Correct.
And what was the other?
And a potential facade grant.
thank you,
The amount of that for TID 5 is like $35,000.
thank you.
Under the term call feature, the notes are being issued for 8 years. There's a call date on March 1st of 2025, which means that the 26 and 27 maturities could be prepaid or refunded if the rates at that time make financial sense. We've talked about rating already, and method of sale would be the same again as the bonds. The only thing different under risk factors is that we're talking about TIF 5. This time we're talking about the water utility and the wastewater utility being able to pay for those issues. And if you want to see what the breakout of those funding sources are, if you would go down to page 8. Okay. Which once again is pretty tiny numbers. There you go. You can see that the levy has the bulk of it for 655,000, water is 75,000, sewer 110, and TIF 5 35,000. So that blue, brown, and green column are the ones where I'm talking about under the risk factors. Okay. Cast of characters are still the same. The calendar's the same, but then I'll lead you back to page 10. This is the 5-year history of the interest rates. As you can tell, it's kind of a roller coaster, but believe it or not, we're at a time right now where we are at or better, lower than we were a year ago when you issued your notes and bonds. So hopefully we're going to keep seeing that decline. There's quite a demand for municipal bonds and notes in the market right now, so that has helped a lot. And there's been some news, obviously, out in the government about the rates as well that has helped the municipal bond rates. So we're at a good time still. The rates are still in really good shape as far as that, and we're hoping that when we come back for sale day, if you decide to go forward, that we'll have great news for you. And then the last schedule I want to talk to you don't have in your packet. I was actually, when I went through this the other day, I was like, I wish it was in there. I am back here on May 6th to go through your 5-year plan, which will have a little bit more of a show on the debt limit. But as far as the debt limit, taking into account the 2 issues that I'm presenting and then the amount that is involved in the Ticey project that you're going to talk about next, that gets you to about 33% of your debt limit with those 3 issues. You don't have a policy in place at this time, but most municipalities are about 50% of their state statutes to 75% of their state statute amount, which you can issue debt up to 5% of your equalized value. So your debt limit for 2019 was about $59 million. And at the, if you issue all 3 of those debts at the end of 19, you'll be at about 19 million. Okay.
So we have about $40 million in equity?
Yes.
$40 million in
Correct.
equity?
Correct.
And as you look out over the next 5 years, maybe when you come back in May, because I understand that the debt falls off over time, can you try to project out how the debt falling off is going to impact that equity position and where that would leave us 5 years from now?
Yeah, and what you'll see is the debt, and I can put a few more things in about debt capacity, but with the projects you have in your 5-year plan, I believe there's libraries, senior centers, and Village Hall. You'll kind of see how those projects impact things. Right now I have it doing basically a property tax thing, but I could also put into the presentation what those projects do to the debt limit each time too. And I think that way you'll see, where do we hit on that. The other thing I was thinking about doing is putting another line on here for the 75% line, so where you're, that last 25% we kind of want municipalities to keep open just in case something bad happens. It's kind of another way to recover from an emergency that maybe you'd have to tap into. And if you issued debt to the max, you'd obviously have your hands tied.
Yeah, so did you say that that's by state statute that we have to stay under 75%?
No, 5% of your equalized value is the state statute, but typically we recommend like between 50 and 75%.
And how does that affect the Moody's rating when we start creeping north of 50 or when we start approaching 75?
If you have a pretty good plan in place to tell them how you're going to handle growth and debt and levy, they will take that into account, because if they can see that you actually have a plan in place on how you're going to accomplish your things and stay within your policies, which it might be something you want to consider. I know you have a fund balance policy, but you could have policies related to debt as well, and it's something to consider in the future.
So we could get north of 50 million in the $75 million range, and if we properly planned, we could retain our Moody's rating and retain the great pricing that goes along with it.
I believe so.
But if we don't
That
plan
financial
properly,
management plan is huge.
What's that?
The financial management plan is a huge thing to them. They like to see that you're really staying on top of how things look, so.
And do we or don't we currently have a financial management plan?
We do not.
Okay.
Well, and I guess we kind of do.
Well, I mean, we don't have a,
Yeah, it's
big
not
of a-
our full-blown one, but
Right.
it does take into account what projects you have in the next 5 years, and we can model out what it looks like, and then you can decide timing-wise when you're gonna do things, because if maybe things creep up to a point you don't like, maybe you'll want to delay things. It's something that when you go into the 5-year planning process, that you have a way to do some what-ifs and probably land where you're comfortable.
Yeah, for many years, I think Eller's worked with Fitchburg, for example, and they had a policy on that's still in place. So they would say, like, if you're going to levy so much money every year, Jeff, only a certain percentage of that can be debt service. I know, and I think you did something for the village of Shorewood years ago, too. That was really
And
in
at
depth.
Wanakee, when I was there, and Ellers was our financial advisor there, I had a debt rate policy, a debt limit policy, which was 50%, although we exceeded that for that village center, but they got under it for the library, and they stayed under it with the library. So it's something that, there's definitely other policies you could look at that kind of, if you're going to exceed them, it's a policy decision that maybe you're going to exceed for a year or two, but it's your choice. It's something that you'll decide.
Thank you.
On what that is, so.
I want to see that too. That would be helpful to plan, because it's hard to keep all the different pieces in your mind and try to figure out what that's gonna look like, so.
I have the,
find
I
that
have the
helpful.
presentation kind of in place. Staff and I are gonna talk about whether the 5-year list is complete or not. And as soon as I have that, then I'll tweak the thing, and I'll add stuff for the debt limit, so that you can see how each of those projects that you have in your 5 years right now affects that.
Other questions or comments for David? Okay. So we can do all these together, is that right? As long
If
as
the
there's
board's
roll
okay
call?
with it, you can make one motion
Yeah.
and David's right, we gotta do it by roll call.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we can do items 3B 1 through 9 as one group rather than having 9 separate votes. If a trustee would like to have any of those resolutions pulled off and looked at separately, you can do that. So I need to read through those to have them on the record, then I'll look for the motion. So item 1, initial resolution number 1902, authorizing $540,000 general obligation bonds for street improvements. Resolution 1903, $320,000 general obligation bonds for fire department equipment. Number 3, 1904, authorizing $70,000 for general obligation bonds for Public Works Building Project. Item 4, resolution 1905, authorizing $985,000 general obligation bonds for park project. Number 5 is 1906, $210,000 for refuse disposal equipment. Item 6 is resolution 1907, $255,000 for the projects and villages tax increment district. Number 4. Item 7, resolution number 1908, authorizing $320,000 for sewage projects. Item 8, resolution 1909, $2,700,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, series 201B. And resolution number 1910, providing for the sale of $875,000 general obligation promissory notes, series 2019A.
I'll move that.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. So are we all okay with having all those as one group? Okay. Any further questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We gotta do roll call votes.
Roll call.
I forgot already. That's okay. Good thing about done.
You know, we should have a drinking game. Every time you say, "This is my last meeting,"
Yeah.
we should all take a shot. I
Pour me
think we'll be pouring out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't walk out of here. Okay, baby.
Carpenter,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Glish,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Follig,
Yes.
Staton.
Yes, thank you. That motion carries 7-0.
Thanks,
Thanks.
David.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. So item 4, village attorney and village administrator. Item A, review of approved Tyson campus plan, which the plan commission approved on April 4th.
We thought it was important for the village board to see the investment that Jason Ticey is making into the village. It's going to be one of the signature buildings in the village for many years to come, and I guess I wanted to show it off a little bit, Jason. That was good, okay? So I wanted the board to see that what you're investing in, so it's going to be a beautiful building. Plan Commission was very impressed with it, and was very impressed with how cooperative that Jason's team was. And, we had a couple conceptual discussions with the Plan Commission, and they addressed everything. The only thing that we held off on was requiring a sidewalk from this building out to Cusick Parkway, and that will be dealt with during the future expansion. Otherwise, the Plan Commission was very happy with it.
Okay.
So.
Other questions or comments, sir?
Do I understand that there's actually a larger, I just want to make sure I have it in my head, especially with the discussion earlier with stormwater. They have a big enough pond and even then some to account for growth? Is that what I understand?
We have a chapter in our municipal code that deals with stormwater that they have to meet. It's been in place for many, many years. So, yeah.
Our planner, Mike Slavenius, correct me if I'm wrong here, has said that our requirements for stormwater are as tough or better than anybody in the county.
Yeah, we use Dane County to enforce that.
Yeah.
Okay.
People in Jefferson may not believe that, and everybody thinks when there's more development, there's more water running off, but it's supposed to end up in ponds and that type of thing.
Okay.
So if there are any questions about that, we could talk about the agreement if you want, Steve.
Any questions, anyone? Okay, and we'll go on to item 4B, discussion and possible action Continued discussion regarding new Tyson campus plan and tax increment financing request and possible action. Item 1 is approval agreement to undertake development with Tyson, possible board action. Approve the agreement, which includes the dispersing agreement. So, who's up here?
Well, I can start, and then I might ask, I don't know if Jason and Nathan want to come up, or...
Yeah, if you guys want to come up right now, that'd be good.
So we have prepared an agreement that's in your packet that is consistent with the outline that was, the framework that was outlined and presented to the board a couple of meetings ago. As you may recall, in terms of highlights, the agreement now defines the project as basically amounting to this facility with office and production space of at least 86,000 square feet. The agreement provides for the village to make $1 million in TIF funding or 10% of the total project cost, whichever is lower, available to help finance the project. The more complicated aspect of the agreement, in my view, is reflected in the disbursement agreement, which will be an agreement among the village, Tyson, Oregon Community Bank, and the title company. And the disbursement agreement basically provides for the village funding to go into escrow, to be held by the title company, and to be dispersed, but to be dispersed only in proportion to disbursements by the bank, so that the bank always has to have 5 times the amount of money invested in the project as the village is investing in the project. And as you recall, that was the structure that was proposed, I think, by Tyson and Tyson's legal counsel as an alternative to some other form of security, such as a letter of credit, for example, to secure the village's financial situation here. The idea with this approach is that we know that as the village money is going in, it's going in to fund the actual development of the project, which will provide tax base, which will then generate tax increment, which is what we need to repay at the $1 million. So that's the structure that is before you. There are 2 little tiny issues here that we still need to finalize before we can sign this agreement and fill in a couple of blanks. And the reason there are a couple of blanks, one is to define the property, because Tyson has been negotiating and developing the precise boundaries of the property that Tyson will buy from Lycon. They do have a CSM now that they're going to process, take to the Plan Commission, and ask to be approved. I think when we discussed this earlier today, the timeline looks like that would be going to the Plan Commission on May 6th, as I recall.
To the board here on May 6th.
Or to the board on May 6th. So to the Plan Commission first, and then here on May 6th. And so the earliest that CSM could be approved by the board and then recorded would be the May 6th, and shortly thereafter for the recording. And then we'll know for certain exactly what the boundaries of the property will be, and we'll be able to calculate. On page 2 of the agreement, there's a blank for base value, and we're going to calculate base value. Basically, that's the value that we're going to agree this parcel that Tyson will buy had as of the date the TIF district was created back in 2017, I believe. But we have to do a calculation to get there. So my suggestion is that if the board is satisfied with the agreement and the structure here, with the exception of those 2 items, that the board approve the agreements on the condition that before they be signed, the CSM has to be approved, and we have to fill in that base value blank. And I think that can be done administratively if the board authorizes that. So the motion would be to approve the agreements, to approve the agreement on the condition that the base value and the CSM be inserted to the satisfaction of, I would say, the village attorney and or the village administrator, and then it wouldn't have to come back to you all again for another vote.
What's the lien position of a municipality in a structured financing deal like this?
So the village won't have a security interest in the property under this agreement. The village is the protection of this agreement, so we don't have a lien. I forgot to mention, there is a personal guarantee being provided and corporate guarantee. I think there's a corporate guarantee by Tacey Printing and a personal guarantee by Jason Tacey is being provided for in this agreement. There's no mortgage, there's no security interest in the property. And so the village is really being protected in two ways. One, the money is going in with the bank's money, so you can make a judgment about the notion that you're actually getting value in the ground, which will generate the tax base. We don't know for certain what that's going to be. I think the projections that have been run, and I think have been presented here, Ellers ran some projections based on the value per square foot of the existing facility.
Yep.
And based on that valuation, if you apply that to the square footage that's being proposed here, you saw those cash flow projections. And as I recall, there might have been there are a few years in the front end
Right,
where
exactly.
the increment is insufficient to cover those annual debt service payments. And so Tacey has agreed to cover those shortfalls in the first several years. Once we get past those first few years,
It levels off.
it cash flows consistently through the remaining life of the TIF district, or until the debt service is paid off. So that's the cash flow scenario. So I suppose, yeah, so to answer your question, there's no lien, but that's the alternative structure that you have. Sure.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we make it very certain to the public that none of the cost of making this TIF grant is going to hit the tax levy.
It's being guaranteed by Jason's.
Right.
Yeah.
It only hits the tax levy if the property, if Tacey as a corporate entity and Jason Tacey personally are unable to meet their obligations under the agreement.
Right.
Because they're obligated to make those payments.
I'm very comfortable with that as I read this document, but I wanted to make sure that anybody reading about this meeting or reading or watching on TV tonight is assured that this is going to be nothing but a plus to the village. Not only is it a wonderful structure, it's going to add 100 jobs to the village, so it's all a very positive thing in my mind.
So I have a counterpoint, just to bookend the conversation then. And that is that, first of all, I think Tyson's done amazing work with the village, both as a business partner and in all of the different businesses that have been built around the village. Tyson's fingerprints are there, a lot of work with the nonprofits. OCRN, Tyson did a lot of work for OCRN. So Tyson is an amazing village partner, and I don't want that to get lost in any of this. But from a business perspective, we have a lot of debt coming on the village right now. And projected in the next 5 years, we have a lot more debt coming on the village right now. And we don't know what that's going to look like. We'll know May 6th a little bit more because Ellers is going to come back and kind of show us a little bit more. But today, we just don't. And with the discussion that we were having earlier about the effect of development and the effect of the drainage, especially in that part of our village, and we don't have our arms around that yet, and we don't know what that means. There's a lot of question marks there as well. And I just personally feel that an ounce of caution is warranted at this time, both from a borrowing perspective, ability to repay perspective, a fallback position for the village, and also with regards to the stormwater that we're dealing with right now and we still haven't quite figured out. So I just want to go on record as to say that there are things that we should be considering and discussing, that we should be questioning these kinds of partnerships and not just going into them blindly, from my perspective. And then I've got questions that can't be answered right now.
Anyone else?
I guess I don't quite understand what Jeff's vocalizing here.
Well, I'm trying not to get into a point counterpoint because
Right, no. and I
Jeannie's
don't
going to
wanna
pass
do
the
that
card.
either.
Tell me to
But I
stop
mean,
talking.
Are you in favor of executing this document or not?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Not at this time.
All right. And we just got done hearing from our bonding expert. What percentage of our debt has been issued?
Well,
Or wait, did you say 33? Did we say 39%? It seems to stick in my head.
33 if you do all three of the issues that.
Yeah, so we're only at 33% of our debt at this point. So I'm quite comfortable with that. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Anyone else? Okay. So I believe we still need a motion, right?
We do, yes.
So the recommended motion is approve the agreement, which includes the dispersing agreement. So we have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions?
Yeah, and Steve, it should be contingent on the CSM and being approved and the base value inserting into the agreement.
Okay.
That'd be okay.
I will add that to my motion.
Okay. You okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that's a part of it. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So we have the motion second to approve the agreement with Tyson, which includes the dispersing agreement. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 6-1. So Mike, you said item 4B2, we're going to hold off on tonight?
Correct. For a couple of reasons. If we pass the resolution, we should do this at the same time the CSM gets recorded so
Okay.
that, because once we submit, if we do this, we submit this to the state, they start processing it, and we don't probably want to do that until the agreement is executed and signed. But then I had a call from a local banker this afternoon, and she raised an interesting point. She says, would the village, rather than doing a state trust fund loan, think about financing this locally? And what we could do, if it's okay with the board, we could do like what Lisa did for JC Park West, which was we just send out a note to each bank and say, we're going to borrow $1 million, 20 years, what's your rate?
Yeah.
And see if they could beat the state trust fund. Right now, it's 20 years at 4.5%.
4.5%. Okay.
And we could do that before, right, Lisa, before May 6th. Yep.
Okay. Did you want to comment on that right now, Elise, or?
Sure.
You don't have to right now if you don't want to. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Just that Oregon Community Bank would be thrilled to finance that bond for the village, and our rate would certainly be lower than that rate the state trust fund.
Okay.
And I explained before the meeting, I said we
Yeah.
can't we have to be careful and give it to each bank.
Yeah, all banks will get that chance locally like they did before.
So Mike, in terms of apples to apples, is a state trust loan a 20-year term, 20-year amortization? Can you please make sure that that's specified in the RFP?
Sure.
That it's a 20-year term, 20-year amortization?
Good point.
Thank you.
Do you need a motion to put that out there for bidding, or how?
I think that would be helpful for the record.
Because I'd make that motion. I think that's a good idea.
Just send a request for proposals to local banks?
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion or comments?
Well, the only thing I would say is that the agreement as currently drafted defines the village borrowing in a way that is specific to the state trust fund program. I'm certain that Tyce, though, if they do, we could secure a lower interest rate, would agree to a change to that. And so we
Yeah.
may yet have you make one more change to this
Amendment,
agreement
okay.
before we're done.
Thanks for that. And we're okay agenda-wise to have this motion, Matt?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It fits with B2.
And the motion is to just what?
To go to get proposals from a local bank and then bring it all back to state trust fund and the local bank proposal.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
And
Okay.
can we do that in a timely fashion? Because if the RFP is going to take us a month to put out there and get stuff back.
It's going to be a simple one.
No, no.
Simple. Okay.
We'll have it back for sure by May 6th.
Okay,
Yep.
good enough.
Any other questions? So we have the motion and second to send RFPs to local banks for the possibly place a state trust fund loan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, so that's all set.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. We're getting there. Item 5 is approval of minutes. There are none before us. Item 6, approval of vouchers. We have vouchers tonight in the amount of $450,033.52 for approval.
I'll move approval,
Second.
Thank you.
and I don't have any questions.
Anybody else? Moving right along here then. Okay, so again, we have motion second to approve vouchers in the amount of $450,033.52. Roll call, please.
Peterson,
Yes.
Staton,
Yes.
Wish,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Carpenter,
Yes.
Boudreaux,
Yes.
Follig.
Yes.
That motion carries. Item 7, community input. Anyone in the audience who would like to address the board? Doesn't look like it. Yes, it's your chance. Okay, item 8A, board comments. Anyone have comments to make at this time? Item B, staff comments. Some notes on upcoming meetings.
Reception from President Staton.
Why?
Supposed to-
And this you know, I'm including Jeff Rowell in the planning, so it's going to be respectful.
Maybe I won't be here till 5:30.
Exactly, that's what I'm telling you, Steve.
Are we going to invite all your former students
Oh.
that have come before the board too?
Room's
Just
not big
hear that
enough.
one more time?
Yes,
Room's not
That's
big
good,
enough.
Jen.
then we'll need the Alliant Energy Center.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 9.
Yeah, right.
Communication miscellaneous business, TDS installation update. Jeff, please.
Yeah, actually, you have the email there, but I since I saw the date on this email, and I'm like, whoa, we're way ahead of that.
Yeah, I
They're
forgot
way
to
ahead of
put it in
that. So I asked the person in charge over there that's handling the construction effort to send me some updated numbers. They have 1,340 services requested as of Friday, and that includes areas that are not turned up yet, that's activated yet. They have 303 residences that are hooked up and active right now. They're installing about 3 per day. They have 12 businesses hooked up, and they're waiting for the construction crew to finish the drop to the high school. So that's the next thing. And they have 939 new orders. Maybe some of those are areas that have not been turned up yet or turned on, and they're waiting for some of the aerial. They've been working with Alliant Energy in kind of getting use of some of the poles and replacing some of the poles, which you'll be seeing in the coming weeks. They also have drop crews, is what they're called, coming in the next week, and those are the crews that are going to start to bury the lines from the pedestal boxes back to the houses. We're finally getting ground conditions where they can do that. And those will happen next week. And then, of course, people are concerned with some spring cleanup, and they're waiting for the ground to dry out a little bit, but as soon as those, they expect probably this month that a lot of that restoration that was not done last fall will be done. So just encourage people, if they have concerns, they can call Village Hall and we'll get them in touch with FiberTech, or they can call FiberTech directly, and that information's on the website.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Jeff? Okay, we'll go to item 9B, discussion possible action, support for development of transportation coalition of community residents, and trustee Peterson has this item.
Yes, so it's an idea I've been kicking around for a while. I may have mentioned it briefly before, but I've been talking to residents, and there's a concern as people are aging and getting older that they're not able to get around town as easily. They can't, drive anymore, and we don't have any public transportation sources other than like Uber and Lyft, and those can get pricey, especially for local trips. In talking to people, I've found some real enthusiasm for looking at some sort of possibility. I realize we looked at this 12, 13 years ago, but I really feel like some attitudes are changing, and the economy is better, and there's lots of things that are different now. Funding sources are becoming more available for this type of thing. I look at other communities, it wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Middleton has a trolley, Monona has their own shuttle system. Monroe, a town of 2,500, has 3 shared ride taxis. You can pay nominal fees like $3, and they'll take you anywhere around the town. I'm interested in forming an Oregon Transportation Coalition to parallel what the Oregon Housing Coalition is doing. If we're going to bring affordable housing here, we should have some sort of public transportation that might go along with it. That is basically the idea, and I'm bringing it to the board just to see what whether you guys are amenable to having this happen and looking at approaches, and if a community group comes together to do the research, is this a good idea or not? What do you guys think?
So you're looking at a way to provide some type of ride for people within the community, or is it also
Well-
pedestrian trails?
No, good question. I'm looking at some way for people to get around the community, and it would probably start as something small, but we are growing, and I think it would get to be big enough. I'm looking at it right now within the Village of Oregon, but with potential to hook up to Madison Metro with park and rides, or who knows. I mean, I know Metro was looked at before having the buses come out here, but I think that was kind of putting the cart before the horse. I feel like we need something local that's vibrant and being used, and then we can show that we have this, and then Madison Metro would want to come out and hook up to us because people here have a way to get to a park and ride or whatever. I don't know, and it's just to investigate possibilities. I don't know what it's going to look like, if it's a shuttle or a bus or a shared ride taxi system, or, there's grant money available. I got a call today from Union Cab that heard that I was interested in doing this and said, oh, there's grant money for that kind of thing. You might look into this and look into that. And there's people out there with ideas, and I just think that it's a good way for our community to reduce our carbon footprint. And it might be part of a greater campaign in the village. Like, everybody knows reduce, reuse, recycle when it comes to recycling. That was very popular. We could have something like a walk, bike, ride share, or something similar, like a greater movement to get people to think about using less fossil fuels.
So you're looking for a motion, second, of support on the vote by the
Well,
board?
not
Is that possible?
necessarily. I just am trying to gauge the willingness of the board to listen to ideas. If this community coalition comes together, I just want to know that if we're going to go ahead and do all this research and work and come with some sort of proposal that we think would work for Oregon, does that sound good to you guys?
I think it's a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm
Okay.
interested
Sure.
to hear what you all find.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm looking for. It's like the housing coalition, they're going to come, at some point, they'll find a developer and they'll come forward with an affordable housing proposition, and we've all said we'd be willing to listen to that. That's all I'm looking for is, something similar, like we'd have a group that would do that, which I'm not in charge of, by the way. I'm not going to chair it. It's not a subcommittee of the village board, but
Let's check
there
back
are
with you in a
people.
couple of months on that.
But I know I found people who are interested, who are willing to do that sort of thing, so that was all.
If you want to investigate pedestrian paths and bike paths, I have a resource in Madison that could be very helpful.
Okay.
In looking at the village and how to make it more efficient and safer.
Sure. And
be-
I think
be a
as
good way
we
to go.
develop going forward, we ought to be
Yeah.
looking at that. I mean, obviously, the library, people have said, bike racks, and
Yeah.
they want it walk accessible, and same thing with senior center and all these projects that we're doing.
Yeah.
So, but good, thank you.
But I was in Amsterdam recently, and they have on average 47% of trips to work are by bike, and that city is crawling with bikes. There are, I saw one two-story bike parking ramp, 2 levels, that
Wait,
was
a
twice as...
two-story bike?
Yeah, 2 levels.
Oh.
Bike
I said a
parking
two-story
ramp.
bike.
You're not listening very well. It was twice the size of this room. And they were all over, not like that, but there were other places. It was absolutely amazing what they had for bikes, so.
I think that's the city where when in driver's ed, they teach you to open your door with your right arm so that you turn to look for bicycles before you open your door. I think I remember hearing that.
That may be. Bikes have the right of way over cars and anything else in the street, over pedestrians. And we were told if you cross a bike path, look left and right at least 3 times before you go, because they're aggressive. And they know they got the right of way and they take it. It was interesting. Okay, sounds like you're all set to proceed, Amanda.
Thanks.
So item C, an update on West Netherwood Road flooding and cost of repairs. Mr. Rao?
Yeah, well, we closed down Netherwood Road during the great melt of 2019. That was on that Thursday, the 14th. And I don't have any pictures tonight. I guess I could have brought some of the video, but it was pretty impressive to see the amount of water coming across Netherwood Road. And honestly, the majority was coming from the Lake Barney area that we've been dealing with for many years, or for many months. But yeah, we closed it down. I would like to just truly hats off to Gary Dish and our great crews that monitored things day in, day out there, put some repair things in place. We're able to procure a very large pump to be able to divert some of the water, which actually, put it into Lerner Park, which is the same drainage area, but it helped divert it away from some of the houses and down near the existing Ticey area and everything like that. We ran those for almost 2 weeks, and we're able to dewater some areas also in Lerner Park, or temporarily, and that was really good. Unfortunately, cost of the repair right now, or cost of that pumping and some of the repairs are right around $12,000 to $15,000 right now. And the majority of that being cost of the rental of the pumps. As a side note, last year we talked about possibly including a large pump in one of our capital improvement plans, and we'll be revisiting that in 2019 when we prepare the 2020 budget of whether or not that wants to be a capital expenditure that would save us some money in the future, if these things continue to happen like that. But it's back open. People were very patient. We got very, very few complaints. Police department did, I think, some very nice enforcement of that to just kind of remind people that closed means closed. And the electronic sign was out warning people about it. I think it was handled exceptionally well, and I was gone, and I very, very little. Maybe that's why it was handled so
I didn't say it, but
moving on, yes, but that's the status of it. We're not sure if we're gonna have problems. There was some longitude or lateral cracking on the road. We did want to let it dry out as long as possible, and that's why we actually kept it closed for an additional weekend. There's a possibility that we'll see some possible, I don't want to say failure, but I'd call them like a linear across the road pothole developed because of some fines that were washed out when it was flowing over the road. We're going to continue to monitor that, and if we need to, we'll have to come in and saw cut. And we'll also have to work with the town of Oregon because that's half their road over there too.
Any questions, Terry?
Jeff, you mentioned putting a pump in the 2020 budget.
Possibly, yes.
Or a request for a pump. Do you have any other use for a pump like that?
Well, the reason we were actually looking at it in the first place is a lot of communities will have a large pump like this on hand for bypassing either when you're emptying your aeration basins, which becomes more frequent. A lot of them are for like when you're having to bypass, say a lift station. We had to bypass the Richards Road lift station and run something across the highway and up. We would have to do that. That's when they become more important. So we're actually looking at it from the sewer utility end of things, but now that we're looking at this, might be something that would be well suited for a split between, say, the stormwater and the sewer utility.
What's the cost of something like that? About?
The one we were looking at was $30,000, and it was smaller than the one we had here, so it'd probably be $40,000 to $60,000. It's a lot of money to invest, and then you have to invest in the discharge piping and everything like that. So, but that's why we'll evaluate that, and if we feel it's something that we can look at going forward. I mean, just alone on this, like I said, it was about $12,000 just for the pumping equipment and stuff.
Have you been working with the township as far as sharing costs?
We've been discussions with the township. I have not had any personal discussions about sharing the cost on that yet because we're kind of seeing where everything ends up here, and we're seeing if there's any kind of damage to the roadway. But we would assume that we're going to ask the town to reimburse at least roadway repair costs on their portion.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments for Jeff on this? Okay. That takes us to item 9D, discussion possible action on review of the police department policies by Chief Buell Actually, Lieutenant Pagankoff will take care of that tonight. And possible board action. Recommend motion is to approve the police department policies. We did get these in email, so we had time to read them. So those policies are police authority and discretion, prisoner transport, promotional process, property control and handling, public information process, special purpose vehicles and canine unit, traffic administration and assistance, vice, drugs, and organized crime, and written directives. So let's bring a motion and a second to get this on the table.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. So the way we went through these before, Chief went through just brought each one up to see if there are questions, right? Any questions or comments? So if you want to go into more detail, go ahead, but you don't have to go into
Are there any
detail.
questions, or do you want me to?
Well, I mean, you can go first.
No,
and
you go
answer.
right ahead.
Oh,
I'd rather that you don't go through the policies one by one.
I figured you would.
hope I'm not the only one. Under property,
Yes.
what is a tail test?
What's a what?
Tail test?
So it's, we take all of the items that are in our property room, whether they're found safekeeping or evidence, and we go by that, make sure I'm using the right verbiage here for policy. We go by this two-tail test, I think it's
Right.
identified as. So if there are, for example, let's say there are 1,000 items in total that we have in property currently, then we would do the one-tail test, but that falls within that diagram, and so we would pull 88 items.
Okay.
And how that works at our police department, we actually just did one, and right now our chief does not have access to our property room, so that he can say he's completely independent. And so what he did is he printed out 88, he just randomly picked 88 items, and he said, go find these for me. So I had to go find them, showed them to him, he inspected them, and he would sign off on each and every one. Now that we've gotten the property room more organized, it went really well. And I imagine in probably about 3 years, it's gonna go very smooth with an accurate record management system. That has made a huge difference.
Awesome.
So,
Very good.
So
Did
what's,
you maybe call the chief, recognize Jenny and Rudy for organizing the property room. Was
Yeah.
a year or two, it was a mess.
Yeah,
and
it
they
was
did
a mess.
it was a huge team
fabulous
effort.
job getting
Yeah,
it
thank you. It was a
organized.
huge team effort, for sure.
It went from no system to a system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and actually, we've helped out other agencies now, so,
Nice.
yeah.
And the
we're proud of
experts
that.
in the field.
Yeah.
So what's a two-tail test then?
So-
That's the other
Yes, so,
part.
per policy, if, let's say out of those 1,000 items, we pull the 88 and something's wrong, per policy, it's gonna tell us, now you gotta do a two-tail test. Now we have to pull, for 1,000 items, originally was 88, now we have to pull 376 to make sure there's not a consistent issue happening. No matter what, I think the chief could still just say, full audit. And after picking myself up off the ground, we did that. So, yes, but for what it's worth, our last one went very smooth, no issues whatsoever. So,
great.
Can I ask a question about that,
Yeah.
Lieutenant? Is there a difference between the evidence room and the property room, or are those the same thing?
more accurately, it's the property room.
And is that where the evidence is also maintained?
Yeah, evidence, found property, safekeeping, unless it's too big. If it's like a vehicle, it'd be out in our impound lot, which is a separate property room identified in this policy. Or we have an overflow area that stores property as well. And so property room's probably the more broad term.
Broad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Next question?
Yes.
Sorry. For prisoner transport, I noticed they called out, there in the policy, there's certain types of prisoners called out. I didn't see a specific policy for pregnant people, and I didn't know if that's something you just don't normally encounter or what, but I wondered if that was a consideration.
It is. It's handled very sensitively. It has happened, unfortunately, before.
Okay.
It could be first term to full term.
Right.
The officer really just needs to take that into consideration and make the best decision.
Sure.
It may be, if it's without a doubt an arrest we have to make, we have, we could, handcuff them in the front if we need to. But if it's a case where we do not have to make an arrest, that's actually where we would probably fall on the policy for police authority and discretion, make a discretion decision to not arrest because we also have to take into consideration that person may go into labor, and then we're stuck in another situation. So
Right.
it's just really case-by-case basis.
Okay. Final question, I'm sorry. I also noticed in that particular section that they called out policies for searches related to having, trying to have an officer of the same sex doing a search when possible. And it just made me think about, does the department do any trainings for people who are transgender, gender fluid, or non-binary, and how to handle those situations?
Trying to think back to our last in-service training where we covered searches. In those situations, we would advise to ask the person, what do you feel more comfortable with? But that also is if a female officer is available.
Right.
We only have 2 females working for our agency, so I often have to leave my office to assist.
Yeah.
But we have a very systematic searching technique, so it is, and it's in accordance with our DAT training through DOJ. Very textbook, but yes, otherwise, in those situations where it's unique, we would just ask the person, who do you feel more comfortable, you know? And I've had situations as a female officer where the female says, I don't want you searching me, I'd rather have the male officer search me. That's fine.
Okay, so cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Randy?
Under the public information process, is it, press releases, is it common practice to list the suspect's name?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It's typically, actually, very rarely do we not. It's the name, the age, and where the person's from. We are a bit selective on when we do press releases. There was one that somebody had contacted me about because they weren't happy with information being released. They thought it was harmful to the person who was involved. But I reached out to the woman after she complained and explained we'd been to that residence so many times, and for violent situations that called for multiple people to respond, it was during the day. So I felt we needed to release that information so the public was informed. You have kids out playing in the front yard and things like that. I want parents to know, and they should know, this is what we were there for. A very summarized, vague bit of information, but enough so that they feel like they're at least informed somewhat. So,
Kind
yes.
of the same thing as the one that was just released on the fire with the cooking.
Yeah, so that was a joint press release. Most of that I would say 90% of that information came from the fire department, but the bit of information that, with the citation, that was from us.
Okay.
So, and that's all open record as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thanks, Lieutenant. We have motion second on those 9 policies. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item E, discussion possible action on Village Hall equipment surplus. Recommended motion is to declare the Village Hall equipment as surplus. Need a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Are there any questions on anything? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item F, Police Department equipment surplus. Recommend motion is to declare that Police Department equipment as surplus.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second it.
Thank you. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item G, discussion possible action about police building sprinkler inspections proposal. Recommend a motion to approve the proposal from Monona Plumbing and Fire Protection for sprinkler inspections at the police building. Do we have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. So annual inspection was 180 and quarterly was 360 for what, 540 total? It's gonna be a yearly thing, right? Gonna do this all the time.
Yep.
Are there any questions on this?
Did you get other bids, or is it just a single bid?
Yeah, so we ended up getting 2 bids. One was through Best Defense, and then the other was through Monona. Monona came in at one price, Best Defense came in at at a lower. Monona found out and came down even lower. So Monona Plumbing actually gave us a cheaper price this year than they did than last.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the motion second to approve the proposal from Monona Plumbing and Fire Protection for sprinkler inspections at the police building. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item H, review of spring election, April 2nd, 2019, results for the village.
I just wanted to say congratulations to Jeannie, Randy, Jenna, and Corey. It was a slow but steady day at the polls. Village turnout was at about 35%, and Dane County was at about 43%. I received an email this afternoon from Scott McDonald. He's thinking we'll know in the next couple of days whether or not there'll be a recount. And as always, I want to thank Village Hall staff and our election workers for making it a successful day.
Good.
Thanks,
Thank
Peggy.
you. Elections always run smoothly here, so nice. Are there any questions, comments? Okay. Item I, thank you to Safe Belt for a youth center donation, and the board actually approved that, to approve the village forwarding $1,052.21 the youth center for the building project. That's half the fees that they were paid off.
And
that,
Steve,
so-
could we just amend that motion, and could it be to the OCRN and the youth center?
Okay.
Motion, please. It's for the building project.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Basically, we're just acting as a pass-through, right? Safe Built has to refund us, and then we're just gonna pass that on to
Correct.
OCRN and the youth
Yes,
center.
Okay, correct. That's a motion, second, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there questions? Looks like with nice weather, things are moving pretty good down there. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the motion second to approve the village forwarding $1,052.21 to OCRN and the youth center for the building project. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item J, information flyer, attention contractors and building permit holders. Basically, that's about cleaning up their lots so stuff doesn't blow all over the neighborhood. Does that take care of that, Jeff?
Absolutely.
Okay. Item K, Oregon Library Project, the capital campaign, progress report from March 2019, and today in the community input session from 5:30 to 8:30 in the Village Hall Community Room, and there's lots going on when you look at the list of all the things that are happening there. Any questions on that? Item L, Oregon Area Fire EMS District and Oregon Police Department. There's a press release on an Oregon fire that they labeled a stark reminder of safe burning practices. A person was apparently using a meat smoker on their deck and caused about a $40,000 fire, I believe it was. So. And they did get a citation. Yes, sounds like, well, they should. Item 10, report of committees. We have Personnel, Public Safety, and Protection Committee from March 25, 2019. And I'll turn this over to Trustee Carpenter, please.
So this is a discussion and possible action regarding establishing a village team to discuss future school resource officer agreements with the school district and discuss the SRO agreement. We're going to go into closed session at the end. And Mike, we talked about, should I amend my motion to have this be the personnel committee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a motion that we have the personnel, the Personnel, Public Safety, and Protection Committee work to negotiate or complete the current SRO agreement and then discuss terms of renewal prior to maturity of the agreement on June 30th, 2019. And I'll still be involved in that, so you may have me on your committee as well.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this? Okay, so we have the motion for the committee to work with the current SRO agreement and discuss terms of renewal prior to maturity of the agreement on June 30, 2019. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 11, minutes not requiring action from March 7, 2019, Oregon Area Fire EMS District. Minutes note that the district's 125th anniversary celebration will be on August 25th, 2019 from noon to 5 p.m.
Can I ask a question about something
You
in
can.
the minutes? There were a bunch of charts in there that had blanks at the beginning. Wait, yeah, it's too far.
Am I going too far?
Yeah, it was back up, right there. See the top line? It has number of runs 27, but it's it's blank over to the left. There's like 3 charts in the minutes that have blanks at the top of the charts, like there. I was like, what does that mean?
Well,
I'll ask Glenn.
yeah, I don't, maybe.
There's a third one in there
It's like,
too, I
yeah,
think.
maybe unknown, yeah, that's what Jenny's thinking of, maybe, right?
I'm wondering
And
if it's
then-
Might be,
unknown.
but like
It's so
the-
high.
that could be for ages or
Yeah.
whatever,
It's
but
fine.
like, you know, did they not know where they took people? Or were
They might
they
not have
runs where
known,
they
yeah.
didn't transport? Or, I don't know. I was just,
Yeah.
And
Sounds
you
like
could- you
Michael
could-
check on that.
Or you could just give Glenn a call
Yeah,
and
that'd
ask
be the
him.
best. Just give him
Okay.
a call.
Yep, just give him a call.
all right,
Good idea, Mike.
I can do that.
Anything else on that? Okay, new business, approval of pending new operator licenses, recommend approval by the police department at Oregon Bowl, Susan E. Helmstetter Miller, Main Tap, Michelle A. Aberg, and Quick Trip 302, Charles R. Byler. Need a motion, please?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Like B, C, and D don't have anything. Item 14, future agenda items. Item 15, the village board will adjourn in a closed session during the meeting pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.851E to discuss possible property acquisition for Rotary Bike Trail and negotiations related to the school resource officer agreement with the Oregon School District. The board will adjourn from closed sessions. Need a motion for that, please?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Boudreaux,
Here.
Bollig,
Or,
Yes.
Of course I'm here. Yes.
Peterson,
Maybe.
Yes.
Carpenter,
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Staton,
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
I think that was all 7 of us. So,
I'm here.
we're in closed section here.
Boudreaux's here.
We'll see if Jeff is here or not.
Jeff's here.
And we'll stay here in closed session.
Hey, Steve, I just need you to sign this.
I'll write it down when I get home, so I don't forget. I looked at it, I did some window peeking. Yeah, today.
Jeffrey, coming on Wednesday morning? Can you come at 8?
Absolutely.
For the youth day? I sent you an email.
No, we'll do
Wednesday
it.
morning, I have planning staff meeting.
Oh, that's right, you and Mike have.
When Mark sent that email, I had declined, was